Alright, how's it going? So, I always talk about learning the fundamentals of art, and a lot of people have been asking me what those fundamentals actually are. So, I've made this list of every fundamental I think is important to learn and how you can practice them. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, I have a Patreon as well as a YouTube memberships link in the description, and there's also a Discord server where you can come hang out with us. Now, the first fundamental, and probably one of the most overlooked ones, is line work. People think line work only involves doing line art for your art, but in reality, your line work skills come into play every time you make a stroke, even during sketches. It's especially a problem when you try to draw curves like circles and ellipses. And this is actually one of the reasons why people struggle to draw hair, because they're unable to draw smooth curves and lines that follow a natural trajectory. And those two things are exactly the things we need to work on to get better at this. So to improve your line skills, the best way I've found is to trace. You can trace whatever you want, ellipses, straight lines, art from other people, but what's important is that you do it slowly and with control. The point of this is to train your muscles to do something they're not used to, so the slower you go, the more control it requires. Now on top of this, lines can be drawn using your wrist, elbow, or shoulder. They all have different ranges of motion, making it easier to draw certain lines. So when you're practicing and actually drawing as well, try to stay mindful of which part of your arm you're using and try to feel that mind-muscle connection as you're drawing. In the beginning, it might make it a lot harder to concentrate on the actual drawing, but that's why you practice it, because eventually it becomes muscle memory and then you don't even have to think about it anymore. Next up, we have observation. Observation revolves around your ability to accurately see things. Now, contrary to popular belief, unless you've practiced your observation skills, you're going to be a lot worse at it than you think. Otherwise, you'd be able to copy your references with pixel-perfect accuracy. There are techniques you can use to get better at observation though, I go over those in this video, but the most important one is paying attention to angles. Let's say we have this 90-degree angle in 2 dimensions. In perspective, however, these angles can vary a lot. This one is closer to 45 degrees instead of the 90 that it was previously. Of course, in reality, this is still a 90-degree angle, but it just appears like it isn't. So when you're trying to observe something, pay very close attention to the angles in perspective. Now to practice this, I recommend drawing from real-life references. As in, grab any object you've got lying around, preferably a boxy one, and then draw that. Try not to use photos because it's better to draw directly from a 3-dimensional object instead of a 2-dimensional photo. Also, the goal of this exercise will be to make your eyes better at seeing angles. So I wouldn't worry too much about the proportions or trying to make your drawing look exactly like the reference. Now before moving on, this video was made possible by Skillshare. So here's the thing, if there's one tip I can give you, it's that no matter how good you are, there's always something you can learn by studying from different artists. Even me, I'm constantly looking for different techniques I can use to improve my art, and Skillshare has just that. Skillshare is an online learning community with classes covering a wide range of topics like film, music, cooking, and what I'm interested in, drawing, animation, painting, all taught by industry professionals. Within these categories, Skillshare has a selection of thousands of different classes you can take, all focused on very specific aspects of the artistic process. You've got classes that range from gesture drawing to learning how to draw texture. Personally, I'm following Brent Visten's class on drawing in 3D and perspective to work on my perspective skills, and his class on measuring and proportions to work on my observation skills. There are also a lot of classes on animation that I'm kind of interested in. Also, the cool thing about these classes is that they're divided into smaller chapters, so even if you don't have a lot of time, you can still go through one chapter a day. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial, so if you're interested, be sure to check it out. Next up, we have your ability to see in perspective, and this is probably the biggest difference between a beginner and a professional. Perspective refers to how humans see things. As things get further away, for example, they get smaller in size, planes get thinner as they turn away from you, and the deeper things are in space, the higher up they will appear in your field of vision. There are ways to calculate exactly how things should look in perspective. Scott Robertson goes over this in his book How to Draw, but unfortunately when it comes to drawing in perspective, especially humans in perspective, it still comes down to having an intuitive sense for what proportions should look like. This intuitive sense comes from first understanding why things look a certain way in perspective. I'm not going going to explain perspective in this video. I'll keep that for a future video because otherwise it'd be a completely half-assed explanation. So instead, I'll tell you how to practice it. First, make sure you understand the concepts of the horizon line and vanishing points. Scott Robertson goes over this in his book, so if you go through the first couple of chapters, you should be good there. Now you can draw a box and then use plane duplication techniques to extend this box in two different directions. The point of this exercise will be to train your eyes to get used to seeing how big and small things get as things move around in space. That's how you're going to train that intuitive sense for seeing proportions. If you want to take it a step further, you can also draw boxes inside of these boxes and kind of treat it like you're trying to draw furniture inside of a room. And if you're going to do that, make sure you keep track of where everything is attached to the walls, to the floor, and how big every box is in relation to every other box. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is what I like to call logic. Drawing is a combination of a bunch of different subjects like math, physics, and anatomy if you like to draw living things. Every single one of these subjects has a hard set of rules. In physics, for example, every object has a center of gravity. The center of gravity for this plank, for example, is right in the middle. For this plank to remain standing, its center of gravity has to fall within its base of support, which in this case goes from one leg to the other. If you take away one of these legs, the base of support becomes a lot smaller, so now the center of gravity falls outside of it, meaning that the plank has to fall over. An example with math is that if you have an ellipse, it has a major and a minor axis. The major axis goes through the two widest points of the ellipse, and the minor axis goes through the two least wide points of the ellipse. On top of this, they always make a true 90-degree angle, even in perspective. These are the rules of reality, and you cannot break these rules, otherwise something is going to look wrong. Every drawing uses its own set of rules as decided upon by you. You cannot break those rules, otherwise something in your drawing will look wrong. This is the reason why animations use character sheets, because they tell you exactly what things are supposed to look like from different angles, and thus they determine the rules. There's no real way to practice this because it's a combination of many different skills. So instead, you'll have to stop yourself from going into autopilot whenever you're drawing, and ask yourself if this makes logical sense according to reality or according to the rules that you've set up in the rest of the drawing. If the answer is no, make a note of that, and then after you're done with the drawing, start experimenting with that. Try to figure out what the rule is that you broke and how to change your drawing to make it follow that rule. And that's it for the video. Hopefully that was helpful. And once again, if you'd like to support the channel, I have a Patreon as well as a YouTube memberships link in the description. You can also join the Discord server if you'd like to hang out with the community or get advice from other artists like me. And once again, thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring the video. Their link is also in the description, so don't forget to check them out. But that about does it, so I guess I'll catch you all later.